The transport ship shook as it connected to the docking port. Yuna held onto the metal bar above her head and waited for the loud hissing sound to stop. The door opened slowly, and cold air rushed into the small cabin. She picked up her bag and stepped forward. The Veth Imperial Station was everything she had imagined and nothing like it at the same time. The walls were dark metal, almost black, with sharp edges everywhere. There were no soft colors. No plants. No windows showing the stars outside. Everything looked hard and cold, built for war and nothing else. A tall figure waited for her at the end of the walkway. He stood over 2 meters high, covered in gray scales that caught the dim light. His eyes were yellow with black slits in the center, and they watched her without blinking. 2 smaller horns curved back from his forehead, and his hands ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Human female. "You are the cultural worker," he said. It was not a question. Yuna nodded. "Yes, I am Yuna. I was sent by the Earth Council for the exchange program." The Veth made a sound deep in his throat. It might have been a laugh, but it did not sound friendly. "I am Officer Kangto. I will show you to your assignment." He turned and walked without waiting for her to follow. Yuna hurried to keep up. Her legs were much shorter than his, and she had to take 2 steps for every one of his. They passed through corridors filled with Veth soldiers. All of them were tall and covered in scales of different colors: gray, green, dark blue, and brown. They all wore armor and carried weapons. When they saw Kangto, they moved aside and pressed their fists against their chests in salute. When they saw Yuna, they stared. She heard whispers behind her. The translator in her ear picked up some of the words. Soft skin. Weak. Why send a child? Yuna kept her eyes forward and did not respond. She had read the reports about the Veth before accepting this assignment. They were a warrior species. They respected only strength and military power. Kindness was seen as weakness. Mercy was seen as foolishness. The strong ruled, and the weak served. Earth had signed a peace treaty with the Veth Empire 3 years ago. The war had lasted only 6 months, but it had been enough for both sides to understand that fighting would destroy them all. Now they were trying to build something better. That was why Yuna was here. Kangto led her deeper into the station. They went down several levels, passing through areas that became darker and more neglected. The walls were dirty here. Some lights did not work. The air smelled old and stale. Finally, they stopped in front of a heavy door with rust around the edges. "This is your assignment," Kangto said. He pressed a button, and the door groaned open. Yuna looked inside. The room was large but poorly lit. There were old sleeping pads on the floor, torn and stained. Bowls of food sat in corners, some of them empty, some of them untouched and growing mold. And in the shadows, she saw movement. Eyes. Many pairs of eyes, all watching her from the darkness. "What is this place?" Yuna asked. "The cub holding area," Kangto answered. "Orphans. Cubs whose parents died in battle or in accidents. They have no clan to take them. No one claims them." Yuna stepped closer to the door. She could see them now. Small Veth children, no bigger than human toddlers, huddled together in groups. Their scales were dull, not shiny like the adults. Some of them had scratches and cuts that had not healed properly. They watched her with fear in their yellow eyes. "They are your responsibility now," Kangto said. "Feed them. Keep them quiet. Make sure they do not cause problems." "Problems?" Yuna turned to look at him. "They are children." Kangto's eyes narrowed. "They are cubs without honor. Their parents failed them by dying. They have no value to the Empire. We keep them alive because the old laws say we must. Nothing more." Yuna felt something hot rise in her chest. Anger. But she pushed it down and kept her voice calm. "I understand. I will take care of them." "Good." Kangto handed her a small device. "This will let you contact the supply office when you need food or medicine. Do not bother the command levels with small problems. No one will answer." He turned and walked away without another word. The sound of his footsteps faded, and then Yuna was alone. She looked back at the cubs. They had not moved. They were still watching her. Still afraid, Yuna set down her bag and lowered herself to sit on the floor. She made herself small and kept her hands open where they could see them. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Yuna. I am going to take care of you now." None of them moved. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small package. It was dried fruit from Earth, sweet and colorful. She opened it and placed a piece in front of her, then pushed it gently toward the nearest group of cubs. Minutes passed. No one moved. Then, slowly, the smallest cub crept forward. She was tiny, with pale green scales and one eye swollen shut from a wound that had not been treated. She sniffed the fruit, looked up at Yuna, and then looked back at the fruit. Yuna did not move. She did not speak. She just waited. The little cub picked up the fruit with her small claws and put it in her mouth. She chewed once, twice, and then her good eye went wide. She made a sound, a soft chirp, and looked back at the others. Within moments, more cubs began to move forward. They came slowly, carefully, ready to run at any sign of danger. But there was no danger. There was only Yuna, sitting on the cold floor, handing out pieces of fruit one by one. By the time the package was empty, 12 cubs sat around her in a circle. They were still scared. They were still careful, but they were not hiding anymore. One of the larger cubs, a male with dark gray scales, pushed forward. He stood directly in front of Yuna and studied her face for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He pressed his small forehead against her knee and closed his eyes. It was a gesture of trust, a request for protection. Yuna felt tears form in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She placed her hand gently on his head and felt the cool texture of his scales. "I will not let anyone hurt you," she whispered. "I promise." The cub made a low rumbling sound and pressed closer. Around her, the other cubs watched, and one by one, they began to move closer too. Above them, somewhere in the upper levels of the station, the commanders and officers went about their duties. They planned battles. They reviewed reports. They gave orders and received salutes. None of them knew what was happening on the forgotten lower deck. None of them knew that something was beginning, something that would change everything. 3 weeks passed on the Veth Imperial Station. In the upper levels, nothing changed. Soldiers trained. Officers commanded. The great machine of the Empire kept moving forward, as it always had. But on the lower deck, in the forgotten holding area, everything was different. Yuna woke early every morning when the station lights turned from red to orange. She washed her face with the small amount of water she was given, and then walked to the cub area. The door always opened before she could touch it now. The cubs heard her footsteps and rushed to greet her. 12 small bodies pressed against her legs as she entered. 12 voices made happy sounds, chirps and rumbles and clicks that she had learned to understand. "Good morning. We missed you. We are hungry." "Good morning, little ones," Yuna said, kneeling down to touch each of their heads. "Let me see your faces." She checked them one by one. The smallest cub, the little female with pale green scales, no longer had a swollen eye. Yuna had cleaned the wound and applied medicine from the supply office. It had taken 5 requests before anyone answered. But she had not given up. Now, the eye was healed, and 2 bright yellow eyes looked up at her with complete trust. "Bomi," Yuna said, using the name she had given the little one. "You look beautiful today." Bomi chirped and pressed her head against Yuna's palm. The other cubs had names now too. The large gray male who had first shown trust was Teho. He was the strongest of the group, and always positioned himself closest to Yuna. The twins with matching brown scales were Jihun and Sunwoo. They liked to play together, and often got into small fights that Yuna had to break up. The quiet female who spent most of her time thinking was Hana. She was the smartest of the cubs and learned new things faster than the others. Each cub had a name. Each cub had a place. Each cub knew that they mattered. Yuna prepared their morning food. The standard rations from the supply office were bland and gray, but she had learned to make them better. She added flavoring packets from her own supplies. She warmed the food properly instead of serving it cold. She arranged it in separate portions so no one had to fight for their share. The cubs ate in silence, focused on their meal. When they finished, they gathered around Yuna again, waiting. "What should we do today?" she asked them. This was their morning routine. Yuna would ask, and the cubs would respond with sounds and gestures. They could not speak her language, and her translator only worked partially with their young voices, but they had found other ways to communicate. Tejo pointed toward the far corner of the room where Yuna had cleared a space for activities. He wanted to practice climbing again. "All right," Yuna agreed, "but everyone takes turns. No pushing." She had built a simple climbing structure from old supply crates and metal poles. It was not pretty, but it was safe. The cubs loved it. They spent hours climbing up and down, testing their strength, learning to use their claws properly. Yuna watched them and gave encouragement. "Good job, Jihun. You made it to the top. Sunwoo. Be careful with your tail, yes, like that. Hana. Try using your back legs more." The morning passed quickly. After climbing practice, they had learning time. Yuna showed them pictures on her tablet and taught them simple words. Some of the cubs could already recognize symbols and sounds. Hana could count to 20 and knew the names of 10 different colors. In the afternoon, something changed. The station shook. A deep rumbling sound passed through the walls, and the lights flickered. The cubs immediately stopped what they were doing and ran to Yuna. They pressed against her, trembling. "It is okay," Yuna said, wrapping her arms around as many of them as she could reach. "It is just the station moving. We are safe." But she was not sure they were safe. She had felt this before the movement of a station preparing for battle or responding to an emergency. Her heart beat faster, but she kept her voice calm. The lights flickered again, then went out completely. The cubs made frightened sounds in the darkness. Small claws gripped Yuna's clothes, her arms, her legs. They were terrified. "Listen to me," Yuna said firmly. "I am here. I am not going anywhere. We will stay together, and we will be fine." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small light stick. When she cracked it, soft blue light filled the area around them. The cubs stared at it with wide eyes. "See? Light," Yuna said. "We have light. Now let us all sit together and wait." She guided them into a tight group and sat in the center with the light stick raised. The cubs arranged themselves around her in a circle, their small bodies pressed against each other for comfort. Minutes passed. The station continued to shake. Somewhere far away, Yuna heard shouting and the sound of running feet. Then a loud crash came from somewhere above them. Metal screamed as something broke apart. The ceiling cracked, and dust fell down on their heads. The cubs screamed. Yuna did not hesitate. She grabbed the nearest cubs and pushed them toward the far corner of the room, away from the damaged ceiling. "Move! Everyone move! Go to the corner!" They ran. Tejo helped her, grabbing smaller cubs with his mouth and carrying them across the room. Another crack formed in the ceiling. A piece of metal fell and hit the ground where they had been sitting moments before. "Keep going!" Yuna shouted. She picked up Bomi, who was too scared to move, and ran. They reached the corner just as a larger section of the ceiling collapsed. Metal and stone crashed down, filling the air with dust and noise. When it stopped, almost half of the room was destroyed, but they were all safe. Every single cub was safe. Yuna counted them with shaking hands. 12. All 12. No one was hurt. The cubs pressed against her, crying and trembling. She held them close and whispered soft words until their fear began to fade. Hours later, repair crews came to check the damage. A young Veth soldier looked through the door and saw Yuna sitting in the corner, covered in dust, with 12 cubs sleeping around her. "How did you survive?" he asked. Yuna looked up at him. "I protected them. That is my job." The soldier stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and turned to call for help. When the cubs woke up, They found Yuna still watching over them. She had not slept. She had not left her position. She had stayed awake through the night, to make sure no more danger came. Tejo pressed his head against her arm. The other cubs gathered close. Something had changed in their eyes. The fear was still there, it would take time to fully fade. But there was something else now, too. Trust. Complete and total trust. This human female, this soft-skinned creature with no claws and no scales, had protected them when danger came. She had not run. She had not left them behind. She had stayed. From that day forward, the cubs never let Yuna walk alone. When she moved, they moved with her. When she sat, they sat around her. When someone approached her, they positioned themselves between her and the stranger, ready to defend her. They were not just orphans anymore. They were her pack, and she was their mother. 2 months had passed since the ceiling collapsed. The repair crews had fixed the damage to the cub holding area, and life had returned to a quiet routine. But not everything was the same as before. The cubs had grown. Their scales were brighter now, healthier. They moved with confidence instead of fear. And they followed Yuna everywhere she went. It started as something small. When Yuna walked to the supply office to request food, the cubs came with her. When she visited the medical station on the lower deck, they walked beside her. At first, the Veth soldiers laughed at the sight, a small human female surrounded by a crowd of worthless orphans, but the laughing stopped after a few weeks. The cubs did not just walk with Yuna. They walked in formation. Tejo always positioned himself at her right side, slightly ahead. Hana walked at her left. The twins, Jihun and Sunwoo, guarded the rear. The others filled the spaces between, creating a moving barrier around her. When someone approached too quickly, the cubs would growl. When someone spoke to Yuna in a disrespectful tone, they would bare their small teeth. They were not playing. They were protecting her. The Veth soldiers began to notice something strange. These cubs, these abandoned orphans, moved like trained warriors. Their formations were perfect. Their responses were instant. It was not something they had been taught. It was something in their blood, but no one reported it to the command levels. Why would they? They were just cubs. They were just orphans. They did not matter. Then came the day that changed everything. Bomi had fallen sick. Her scales had turned pale, and she could not keep food in her stomach. Yuna had sent 5 requests to the medical station for medicine, but no one had responded. The lower deck was forgotten, and forgotten people did not get help. Yuna looked at Bomi lying on her sleeping pad, too weak to move, and made a decision. "We are going to the upper decks," she told the cubs. "Bomi needs medicine, and I am going to get it." The cubs looked at her with serious eyes. They understood. Tejo moved to his position at her right. Hana took her place at the left. The others fell into formation around them. With Bomi cradled gently in Yuna's arms, they walked out of the holding area and into the corridor. The first checkpoint was easy. The guards there were used to seeing Yuna pass by with her cubs. They barely looked up as she walked through. The second checkpoint was different. A security gate blocked the path to the middle levels, and 2 soldiers stood guard with weapons ready. "Stop," one of them commanded. "Lower deck personnel are not permitted past this point." Yuna kept walking. The cubs kept walking with her. "I said stop." The guard raised his weapon. Tejo growled. It was a deep sound, much deeper than should have come from a cub his size. The other cubs joined him, and suddenly the corridor was filled with the rumbling of 12 young Veth voices. The guards hesitated. They looked at each other, then back at the approaching group. Something beeped. A light on the security panel turned from red to blue. The gate opened. The guards stared in shock. They had not touched the controls. The system had opened the gate automatically. Yuna walked through without slowing down. The cubs followed in perfect formation. "What just happened?" one guard asked. The other guard was checking his scanner. His face had gone pale. The system detected a command formation. It registered high commander level clearance. "That is impossible. Those are just cubs." But the gate was open, and the human female was already gone. Yuna did not know what had happened at the gate. She did not understand why the doors opened for her. She only knew that Bomi was dying, and she needed to keep moving. They passed through corridor after corridor. Every security point reacted the same way. Scanners beeped, lights changed color. Doors opened before they could reach them. Guards watched with confusion but did not stop them. On the command level, alarms began to sound. High Commander Dohan was reviewing battle reports when his assistant rushed into the room. "Sir, we have a situation. Someone with High Commander clearance is moving through the station. But we cannot identify them." Dohan looked up sharply. "Show me." They pulled up the security feeds. Dohan watched as a small human female walked calmly through checkpoint after checkpoint. She carried something in her arms, a sick cub. Around her, other cubs walked in perfect military formation. "What is this?" Dohan demanded. "She is the cultural exchange worker, sir, assigned to the cub holding area on the lower deck." "Then why is the system giving her my clearance level?" No one had an answer. Dohan stood up. "I will handle this myself." He strode out of the command center with his personal guards following close behind. They moved quickly through the station, heading to intercept the strange procession. They found her on level 7, standing outside the medical supply room. Yuna looked up as the High Commander approached. She saw his decorations, his rank markings, the way everyone around him moved with fear and respect. She understood who he was, but she did not step back. She did not bow. She just stood there, holding Bomi, surrounded by cubs who had positioned themselves between her and this new threat. "You are the human," Dohan said. "You have triggered every security protocol on this station. Explain yourself." "My cub is sick," Yuna replied simply. "She needs medicine. No one would answer my requests, so I came to get it myself." Dohan stared at her. "Your cub?" "Yes, my cub, Bomi. She has been vomiting for 3 days. Her temperature is too high. If she does not receive treatment, she will die." The High Commander was silent for a long moment. He looked at the human female, at the sick cub in her arms, at the 11 other cubs standing guard around her. They were growling softly, their young eyes fixed on him without fear. "Do you know who I am?" Dohan asked. "You are the commander of this station," Yuna answered, "and you are standing between me and the medicine my child needs. Please move." Behind Dohan, his guards reached for their weapons, but Dohan raised a hand to stop them. He looked at the cubs again. Really looked at them this time. He noticed their formation, their positioning, the way they moved as a unit. Something stirred in his memory, something from the old records, the genetic archives. "Open the medical supply room," he ordered. His guards obeyed without question. The door slid open, revealing shelves filled with medicine and equipment. "Take what you need," Dohan told Yuna. She did not thank him. She did not waste time with words. She walked into the room and began searching for what Bomi needed. Dohan watched her move. He watched the cubs follow her inside, maintaining their formation even in the small space. And he began to understand what was happening. These were not ordinary cubs. These were not random orphans. And this human female had done something that no Veth had managed to do in 3 generations. She had awakened something that had been sleeping. Dohan turned to his assistant. "Find me the genetic records for every cub in that holding area. I want them on my desk within the hour." The investigation had begun. High Commander Dohan sat alone in his private quarters, surrounded by data screens. The information glowed in the darkness, casting blue light across his scaled face. He had been reading for hours, and what he had found made him feel something he rarely felt: shame. The genetic records were spread before him, 12 files, 12 cubs, 12 names that should have been spoken with honor instead of forgotten in silence. Teho, son of War Commander Kang, who had led the defense of the Southern Fleet and died destroying an enemy command ship. His sacrifice had saved 40,000 lives. Bomi, daughter of Admiral Yu, the greatest naval strategist in 3 generations. She had planned the victory at the Crimson Nebula before dying of wounds received in battle. Ji-hun and Sun Woo, twin sons of the legendary pilot Bake, who had single-handedly held the defense line during the siege of Ash Station. He had been shot down on the final day of the battle, minutes before victory was declared. Hana, daughter of General Im, the master tactician who had written the military strategies, still taught at every Veth academy. She had died protecting refugees during an enemy attack. The list continued. Every cub in that forgotten holding area was the child of a hero. Every single one of them carried the blood of Veth legends, and they had been thrown away, abandoned, left to starve in a dark room because no one had bothered to check who they were. Dohan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In Veth culture, the children of fallen heroes were supposed to be honored. They were supposed to be raised by the best teachers, given the finest education, prepared to follow in the footsteps of their parents. It was ancient law, sacred tradition. Someone had broken that law. Someone had looked at these cubs and decided they were not worth the effort. Someone had hidden them away, where no one would ask questions. Dohan would find that person, and they would answer for what they had done. But first, he needed to understand something else, something that confused him more than the genetic records. Why had the security system given these cubs high commander clearance? He pulled up the technical files and studied them carefully. The answer was hidden in the old code, buried deep in the station's original programming. The Veth had designed their security systems to recognize command formations. When cubs of legendary bloodlines walked together in the traditional guardian pattern, they triggered automatic clearance protocols. It was meant to ensure that the children of heroes could never be trapped or imprisoned by lower-ranking officers. It was a protection built into the very bones of the station. But there was more. The system had detected something unexpected. In the center of the formation, surrounded by the cubs, the scanners had identified a single life form that was not Veth, a human female. The system had classified her as the protected subject, the one the cubs were guarding. In Veth tradition, when warriors formed a guardian pattern around someone, that person was recognized as their chosen leader, their pack mother, their commander. The cubs had not just been walking with Yuna, they had been declaring her as their leader, and the station's ancient systems had accepted that declaration. Dohan leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. A human. A soft-skinned, clawless human female, with no military training and no rank. The children of the greatest Veth heroes had looked at her and decided she was worthy of their loyalty. What had she done to earn that? He needed to know. He stood up and left his quarters, walking alone through the corridors of the station. His guards tried to follow, but he waved them away. He wanted no witnesses for this conversation. The cub holding area looked different than it had in the records. Someone had cleaned the walls and fixed the broken lights. The sleeping pads were arranged neatly, and the food stations were organized. Simple decorations hung from the ceiling paper shapes that looked like stars and moons. Yuna was sitting on the floor with the cubs arranged around her. Bomi was in her lap, weak but alive. The medicine had worked. The little cub would survive. All 12 pairs of eyes turned to look at Dohan when he entered. The cubs immediately moved into defensive positions around Yuna, their small bodies tensed, ready to fight if necessary. "Do not be afraid," Dohan said, keeping his voice soft. "I am not here to cause trouble." Yuna studied him for a moment. Then she placed a gentle hand on Teho's head. "It is okay. He is not a threat." The cubs relaxed slightly, but did not leave their positions. Dohan lowered himself to the floor, folding his large body into a sitting position. It was not easy, he was old, and his joints ached. But he wanted to be at their level. He wanted them to see him as something other than a towering authority figure. "I have read the genetic records," he said to Yuna. "Do you know who these cubs are?" "I know they are children who were abandoned and afraid," Yuna replied. "I know they were hungry and hurt when I first met them. I know they needed someone to take care of them. They are the children of heroes, the greatest warriors our empire has ever produced. Every single one of them." Yuna looked down at Bomi, sleeping peacefully in her lap. "That does not surprise me." "It does not?" "No." She met his eyes. "I always knew they were special. I could see it in the way they moved, the way they thought, the way they protected each other." She stroked Bomi's scales gently. But it did not matter to me who their parents were. They were just children who needed love. That is all I saw. Dohan was quiet for a long moment. In our culture, the children of heroes are supposed to be honored. They were supposed to be raised with respect and given every advantage. Instead, they were thrown into this forgotten place and left to die. I know, Yuna said. I saw the condition they were in when I arrived. It was cruel. It was a crime. Dohan's voice was hard. I will find the person responsible. They will face justice. Yuna nodded but said nothing. Dohan looked at the cubs again. They were watching him with careful eyes, still protecting Yuna even though she had told them he was not dangerous. They would not leave her side. They would not abandon their formation. They chose you, he said. Do you understand what that means? They are my children. Yuna replied simply. I am their mother. There is nothing complicated about it. In Veth tradition, when warriors choose a leader, it is a bond that cannot be broken. They have declared you as their pack mother, their commander. According to our oldest laws, you now have the same authority as their parents did. Yuna considered this. I do not want authority. I just want to take care of them. Those two things may be the same. Dohan rose slowly to his feet. I will report what I have found to the Veth Council. There will be questions. There may be challenges, but I will speak in your favor. Why would you do that? Dohan looked at the cubs one more time. At Teho, strong and protective. At Hana, quiet and intelligent. At Bomi, surviving against all odds because a human female refused to let her die. Because they are happy, he said. For the first time since they lost their parents, these children are happy. You gave them that. And I believe their parents, wherever they are now, would be grateful. He turned and walked toward the door. Hi, Commander, Yuna called after him. He stopped. Thank you for the medicine. Dohan allowed himself a small smile. Thank you for taking care of our future. Quote. Then he was gone, leaving Yuna alone with her cubs. They pressed close to her, and she held them tight. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Veth Grand Council chamber was the largest room Yuna had ever seen. It stretched upward like a cathedral, with walls of polished black stone that reflected the light from 1,000 floating lanterns. Ancient banners hung from the ceiling, each one representing a legendary clan or a historic victory. The air smelled of incense and old power. Yuna stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by her cubs. They had insisted on coming with her. When the council messengers had arrived to escort her to this meeting, the cubs had formed their guardian pattern without being asked. Nothing could make them leave her side. The council members sat in elevated seats arranged in a half-circle around her. There were 15 of them, the most powerful leaders in the Veth Empire. Their scales were marked with ceremonial paint, and their eyes studied Yuna with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. High Commander Dohan stood to the side as her advocate. He had explained the situation to the council over the past 3 weeks. Now it was time for them to make their decision. Human female Yuna, the council leader spoke. His name was Elder Myung, and his voice echoed through the massive chamber. You have been called before us to answer questions regarding your relationship with the offspring of our fallen heroes. Do you understand why you are here? Yes, Elder. Yuna replied. Her voice did not shake. She had practiced staying calm, even when she was afraid. The cubs needed her to be strong. High Commander Dohan has presented evidence of your actions over the past 3 months. He claims that you took abandoned cubs into your care, nursed them to health, and earned their loyalty through acts of kindness and protection. Is this accurate? It is. Elder Myung leaned forward. He also claims that these cubs have declared you as their pack mother through the traditional guardian formation, that they have triggered ancient security protocols by placing you at the center of their protection. Do you deny this? I do not deny it, but I did not ask for it. The cubs chose me on their own. Murmurs spread through the council. Some members looked angry. Others looked confused. A human could not be pack mother to Veth children. It went against everything they believed about blood and heritage. A council member with dark blue scales spoke up. His name was Lord Sang. This is an insult to our traditions. These cubs carry the blood of our greatest warriors. They should not be following some alien creature who cannot even bare her teeth in threat, and yet they do follow her, Dohan replied calmly. I have watched them myself. Their formation is perfect. Their loyalty is absolute. These cubs have made their choice, and according to our oldest laws, we must honor that choice. Our oldest laws were not written for humans, Lord Sang shouted. Our oldest laws were written for warriors, Dohan countered. They state that any being who earns the loyalty of Veth children through acts of courage and protection may be recognized as their guardian. They do not specify species. They specify character. The council erupted into argument. Some members agreed with Dohan. Others sided with Lord Sang. Elder Mayung had to raise his hand 3 times before silence returned. Human female Yuna, Elder Myung said. We have a proposal for you. If you accept official rank within the Veth military structure, you will be recognized as the legal guardian of these cubs. You will be given resources, quarters on the command level, and the authority to raise them as you see fit. This would resolve the legal questions and satisfy both tradition and practical need. Yuna was quiet for a moment. She looked down at the cubs around her. They were watching the council members with careful eyes, ready to growl if anyone threatened their mother. I do not want rank, Yuna said finally. Shock rippled through the chamber. You refuse? Elder Myung asked. I refuse the rank. I do not need a title to love these children. I do not need military authority to protect them. Yuna straightened her shoulders. But I will accept guardianship. If you want to make it official, then make it official. Give me the legal right to raise them as my own. That is all I ask, Lord Sang scoffed. You would reject honor from the Veth Empire? Yuna met his eyes without flinching. Where was the Empire's honor when these children were starving in a forgotten room? Where was your precious tradition when they were sick and afraid and alone? She shook her head. I do not need your ranks or your titles. I only need these children. They are my family now. That is more important than any honor you could give me. The chamber fell silent. Elder Myung studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to nod. You speak with the voice of a mother, he said. You have earned the right to speak that way. He turned to the other council members. I move to grant this human female permanent guardianship of the hero blood cubs. She will not receive military rank, as she has refused it. But she will receive all the legal protections of a Veth parent. Her children will be recognized as her children under law. Does anyone object? 1. Lord Sang opened his mouth to argue. But a soft growl stopped him. He looked down and saw Taeho standing directly in front of him. Small body tense. Young teeth bared. The cub was warning him. Lord Sang slowly closed his mouth and looked away. The motion passes, Elder Myung declared. Human female Yuna, you are hereby recognized as the legal guardian of these 12 cubs. You will be given proper quarters, adequate supplies, and access to education and medical services. Your children will be raised as hero blood, with all the rights and responsibilities that come with that status. Yuna bowed her head. Thank you, Elder. Do not thank me, Elder Myung's voice softened. Thank yourself. You did what we failed to do. You saw children who needed love, and you gave them love. That is the true heart of our tradition, even if many of us have forgotten it. The council session ended. Yuna walked out of the chamber with her cubs surrounding her. They moved through the great halls of the station, past soldiers who now stepped aside with respect, past officers who nodded in acknowledgement. When they reached the elevator that would take them to their new quarters, Yuna stopped. Wait, she said softly. The cubs looked up at her with questioning eyes. She knelt down so she was at their level. One by one, she touched their faces, their scales, their small hands. Taeho, Hana, Jihoon, Sunwoo, Bomi, All of them. I want you to know something, Yuna said. No matter what anyone says, no matter what happens in the future, you are my children. Not because of any law or council decision. Because I love you. Because I choose you. And I will always choose you. Always. The cubs pressed against her. Small arms wrapped around her neck. Small heads rested against her shoulders. Soft chirps and rumbles filled the air, sounds of happiness, of love, of home. Bomi looked up at Yuna with her bright yellow eyes. The little cub was healthy now. Her scales shining. Her spirit strong. She made a soft sound that the translator could not fully interpret, but Yuna understood it anyway. Mother. She gathered them all into her arms and held them close. Somewhere above, the stars turned slowly in the endless darkness of space. The Veth Empire continued its ancient work of war and conquest. Great ships moved through the void, carrying soldiers to battles that would be remembered or forgotten. But in a small elevator in a distant station, a human female held 12 alien children and promised them something that no weapon could destroy. No empire could take away. She promised them love. And that, in the end, was the most powerful thing in the universe. The doors closed, and they rose together toward their new home. A family born not from blood, but from choice. Not from duty, but from devotion. The cubs had found their mother, and she had found them. The story was just beginning.